so we figure we're going to do a little study of primacy recency effect and see which components you remember the better. Okay, I do just want to welcome a few people, and some I have seen, some I have not, but we do want to offer an official welcome to Bill Balfrop and James Krosky, both candidates for SSCA second Vice President. Are they here? Could you stand? Oh, could you stand, please? And be recognized. Is Randy McCarroll here? Randy? Ah, good. Stand and be recognized. First Vice President, already there, and struggling through convention planning himself. Is Sherry Morial around? Sherry Morial is the SSCA representative from the national headquarters. We welcome you all, so please you can join us. And now I am going to introduce Lauren Reed, who is going to say a word or two of welcome.
On behalf of the Central States Communication Association, I want to welcome the ladies and gentlemen of the Southern States Communication Association to Missouri, my home state. And over above that, I want to welcome them to St. Louis, the baseball capital of the universe. Missouri is such a self-contained state that you can get almost anything you want here. And St. Louis is not too bad at that either. You want wheels? We've got wheels. Ford, General Motors, David Chrysler. You can pick it up anything you want. You want to fly? McDonnell Douglas operates here. And it's related to boating. So we can take travel in that direction. You want beer? And we got beer. And I owns this place. So have a good time and just tell them that Laura sent you.
I understand we have a response from Dwight Presley.
I have had the rare privilege of following that diminutive giant 3 times in this convention. And that will be etched very deeply in my long-term memory. Yesterday we were at the Past President's luncheon, and I failed to do one thing. I failed to induct Susan Silverton into the Past President's Club. I do so now. Where is she? I hereby induct Susan into the Past President's Club. I do this with much satisfaction and enthusiasm. You will take that honor after you finish these duties. You will be an honorable Past President, unlike a certain person in Washington who soon will just be a president of the past. I want to say that Lauren and Sandra, Harley, Daniel, and others, your hospitality of Central has just, Larry Fry, has been marvelous, and we thank you for it. We hope that Southern has left a mark or two. I'm reminded of Peter Applebaum's comment that New York Times reporter just wrote a book in the South, and he said, talking about Southern symbols, that the 3 of the most recognizable names in the world are Coke, Elvis, and Jesus. 2 of them come from the South, and the 3rd might as well have been. This past week we have shared our proud legacies together. And now we hope to blaze new academic trails and innovative frontiers in the century to come. And Lauren, Arlie, Sandra, let's do that together.
traditions of Southern. One thing I would like to do while you're eating is, before you get too far on, have all of the undergraduate honors conference students to please stand, if you would, so we can give you a round of applause. Please stand up. As we told you earlier at a reception, we look to you. You are our future, so we're very glad that you're here. We want to thank Mary Evelyn Collins for planning the Undergrad Honors Conference, and we will announce the winner of the top paper later. While you're eating, I want to announce some winners that we announced at our breakfast. These were people who presented top papers, and we have given them a certificate, but I would like to read their names so that they will get some recognition. If you would hold your applause until the end, I would appreciate it. If the winners are here, if you would just please stand. Applied Communication Division, the top paper award went to Brad Rollins and Jennifer Robbins. The Communication Theory Division, Outstanding Scholar, Joanne Keaton, University of Memphis. Top paper awards in Communication Theory to the following people: Diane Holmes, LSU; Renee Edwards, LSU; Mindy Kane, LSU; Debbie Daughtry, University of Nebraska-Lincoln; Maria Dolores Garcia Pastor, University of Iowa; Lynn Harder, University of Nebraska-Lincoln; Carolyn Hagen, Brigham Young University. Gender Studies Division, top paper award to Catherine Hawkins of Wichita State University. Okay. Christopher Bowers of Wichita State. The Outstanding Gender Studies Scholar Award went to Trudy Hansen of West Texas A&M. There's Trudy there. Intercultural Communication Division, top paper to Danny Gibson, University of Memphis. Interpersonal Communication top paper awards, William Powers, Texas Christian; Paul King and Melissa Young of Texas Christian. Language and Social Interaction, top paper award to Tamara Bolas Pesky. Top faculty paper, Maria Lynn Rios, Georgia Southern; Hal Fullerton, Georgia Southern; Trudy Hansen, West Texas. Mass Communication Division top paper went to Glenda Bayless. Glenda, are you? The Mass Communication Division also gives what we call Production Showcase Awards. The winners were David Levin, University of Memphis; Sharon White Coe, Georgia Southern; Roxana Gee, University of Memphis; Colin Pillow, Arkansas State University; and Carol Parmiani, University of New Orleans. The Popular Communication Division top student paper, Charles Sokup, University of Nebraska-Lincoln; top faculty paper, Maria Lynn Rios, Georgia Southern. I read that one. I've already read that. The Rhetoric and Public Address Division, Peterson Award, Jerome McCaffey. The Southern Forensics Association Coach of the Year, Crystal Cole, Murray State University. This is sort of like the awards, Academy Awards. And please join me in thanking and congratulating all of you. Thank you. Now we give you a few minutes to enjoy your lunch.
So I did notice while we were eating that two people sneaked in and shall not go unnoticed. Yes. at the far side, on the right side, my right side is Lauren Reed, whom you just seen give a welcome. Cynthia Berryman Fink, who is at the end of this conference, the Vice President, will be planning our convention in Detroit. Next to her is Lynn Turner, our Executive Secretary, doing a wonderful job moving all of us through each of these conferences. Next to her is Arlie Daniel, who will at the end of this convention become the president and plan this wonderful convention. I'd like to thank Arlie, it was really beautifully done. And I think I'm going to save my introduction for this person to my right, Dr. Sam Becker. We'll have a much longer introduction since he is our keynote speaker for today's meeting.
It's my pleasure to introduce the other end of the table from the southern states. At my far left is Dwight Freshley at the University of Georgia. Dwight's already spoken to you, and he is retired, but it's hard for us to remember that Dwight is retired. He has been a past president, executive director, and editor for Southern. So we certainly appreciate Dwight and his continued work with the past president's group. Dwight. Vice President-elect Mary Ellen Collins from Sam Houston State University. Again, he's an active past advertising manager and currently planning the undergrad honors conference for this convention. And we thank you for that. Vice President Gary Copeland, University of Alabama, is our planner with Arlie, and we thank Gary for his good work also. So let's clap for Gary. Actually, Gary was broken in. He reminded me that in 1987, when we had a joint conference in Clarion, he had the privilege of planning mass competition, so he was well prepared. Next to me is a person who needs no introduction. I know people in Southern and maybe many of you in Central also, is our Executive Director, Richard Ranta, from the University of Memphis, who, like Ned, is tireless in keeping our bills paid, our dues collected, and keeping us going. So good.
To possibly look a little uneven if you're not a member of Central States. We give our awards at our business breakfast on Friday morning. So all of our awards have already been given, and we do great celebrations for those persons who receive those awards. However, I do understand that Southern gives their awards at their luncheon, which they, I think, traditionally have at their conventions. So what we are going to do is recognize those persons who have already received their award yesterday at our breakfast, and they have already gotten their certificates and their money and all of that. But if they are present, we would certainly like to honor them. One in particular is the winner of the Graduate Student Teaching Award. And Central States has not done this before, but Southern does give a Graduate Student Teaching Award. And they courteously invited us to participate in that award and granted a winner from the Central States region. We were so pleased with that process that now Central States will begin also looking into giving a Graduate Student Teaching Award. That was a wonderful idea. The first winner of that award is Scott Tinsworth. Scott, are you here? Scott is currently a graduate student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, but will be taking a job at Morehead State University starting in the fall. Our congratulations to Scott. He is truly an outstanding individual. It's my pleasure to introduce the Southern States recipient of the Graduate Student Teaching Award. She's a graduate student at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Would Amanda Gunn come forward, please? please stand as I read your name, and then we will recognize all of them at once just for the sake of time. We gave 3 outstanding young teacher awards. These are persons who were in their first 5 years as an assistant professor at a university, college or university. And the committee this year selected Gary Meyer at Marquette, Carol Bruce at the University of St. Thomas, and Donna Pulaski at Creighton. Will you please stand? We have another award which we give, and it's in the area of research, broadly defined as scholarship. It's the Federation Prize. And the person who wins this award is given some of the money, and over the year, based on the project that they propose, and then over the year they conduct that research and present the results of their efforts at the next convention. So a person who wins this year will then present next year based on what they have accomplished. And this year's winner is Timothy Selnell. Is Timothy here? Timothy?
He's not doing it for sure.
He's out doing his research, exactly where he should be. Anyway, it sounds like an exciting project. Congratulations, Timothy. We have another award which we're quite proud of, and we enjoy giving, the Gus Friedrich Award. And this is another one of our teaching and service awards. And it is obviously based on the high standards that Gus Friedrich has established for us in this field. And this year's winner was Tammy Bullish from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Is Tammy here? Well, she was there yesterday and enjoyed it. So, congratulations. I might just add, we have one other award that we give each year, and that is the Sam Becker Award. And that particular award will be presented just before Sam speaks this afternoon, and he will have the honor of giving that award to that student.
It's my pleasure to present the Southern States Communication Awards, and we have several awards that we have developed over the years, and these awards are becoming endowed, which is helping us provide for the class. The first award I would like to present is the Franklin Shirley Award for the top undergraduate honors paper. The competition was very close this year, according to Mary Evelyn, and so I want to recognize the runner-up. And if Mike is here, Mike Whitco with the University of Wyoming, if you'll come forward quickly, we'll give you your certificate. Mike? The winner of the Franklin Shirley Award is a gentleman, Nathan Daniel Lott, Stanford University. His paper was entitled Bill Clinton and the Art of Rhetorical Blame Shifting. That was tough, I had to watch that one. Nathan has been selected to attend the National Conference on Undergraduate Research, so he cannot accept the award, but I understand that Michael Janis is here to accept on his behalf. Michael? Okay. I'd like to take just a minute to remind all of you, we need to acknowledge 2 very special people who have worked with us as we developed the Undergrad Honors Conference, Michael Osborne and Susie Osborne. If you would please stand. I think Michael had the idea for the Undergrad Honors Conference in a presidential address several years ago, and we have followed up, but they have also graciously continued to host, along with Hope Mifflin, a reception where the undergrad honor students are recognized and also all of our other vendors, and we do appreciate your support. The next award that it's my privilege to give is the Robert Bostrom Award. years ago, colleagues of Bob's at the University of Kentucky wanted to honor him and have donated money to establish this award. It's called the Robert Bostrom Young Scholar Award, and typically it goes to graduate students. I would like to recognize the runners-up for this, and if you would stand in place and let us applaud you, and then we will give your certificates and your money, since you get a cash award afterwards. Caitlin Willis at the University of Georgia. Is she here? Thank you. She's in the back. Lee Berger of the University of South Florida. Monica Olson of the University of Nebraska, Omaha. The winner of this year's Bostrom Young Scholar Award is Martin, so is that it? How do you say it? Carcassonne, Texas A&M University. His paper is entitled Justice Hugo Black's Radio Address Concerning the KKK. You would think with a name like Silverman, I would work on this. It's now my honor to recognize two people who have worked very diligently for Southern States Communication Association. The outgoing advertising manager is Jeff Dolan. Jeff, if you will come forward. Jeff has worked for us for 6 years. She has raised lots of money. I think her report said close to $40,000. She has worked this year along with your advertising manager to get the book exhibitors, the journal ads for us. And we couldn't have done without Jeff's diligent work. And she is retiring this year. Although we tried to recruit her for another term, she was not willing to do that, but we do appreciate that. The next person we want to recognize who is retiring but not really leaving us is Craig Allen Smith, our retiring journal editor. Craig, if you'll come forward here. Craig became our editor 3 years ago and is at the last stages. I think the last issue he reported yesterday will be at the printer, as they say. And we are most appreciative of Craig and all of the people who have worked with him. Thank you. Several years ago, we instituted several awards in the association. Actually, I think we were inspired by you folks at Central because you had a lot of awards and we didn't have very many. The first award we want to give we call our Outstanding New Teacher Award. And I'd like to read just a couple things about this person. The person's chair wrote, she has a genuine heart for students and a passion for teaching. She has a special vision toward adapting course content to the interests, learning styles, and cognitive abilities of her students. One of her students wrote, she inspires me, she enjoys everyone. When I first became a teaching assistant at Texas Tech University, it was solely a means to an end. She consistently shows me the joys of teaching. Finally, one of the committee members who selected her said, she's totally devoted to the art of teaching, she practices what she preaches, and has inspired many with her teaching. It is our pleasure to recognize Carla K. Jensen of Texas Tech University as our outstanding young teacher. The next award we established is called the Early Career Research Award. This year's recipient received a master's degree from Florida State University and a PhD from Louisiana State University. He graduated 4 years ago. He's been deeply involved in the American Communication Association, serving as an assistant editor on the online journal. He was one of the first to investigate Asian rhetoric. He writes knowledgeably about a variety of areas, including the impact of technology on research and publishing. He's been very active in the Kenneth Birth Society. He has published one book, Presidential Crisis Rhetoric, which is in its second printing, and is working on a second book with his major professor and mentor, Andy King. It's my pleasure to give the Early Career Research Award to Jim Kuipers of Dartmouth College. The next award is called our Outreach Award. And this was established to recognize people in our association who have done things that have really helped us reach out to people who have not been active in Southern in various different ways. This year's nominee, I'll read the comments. When I was new to academia in my second year as an assistant professor, I was new to the South and found a combination of these two experiences, to say the least, frustrating. The career I began able to develop since those days is very reflective of Bob's guidance. Through personal example and more overt mentoring, Bob helped me make sense of the profession. As an editor for Prager's Political Communications series, he's been an active seeker of new talent, generous in supporting their work on new books and new chapters. It is my pleasure to present the Outreach Award to Robert Denton. The next award is entitled the Rose B. Johnson Award. Those of you who like to take time and look in the old journals will find in 1935, Rose was the force that established our journal. She debated for 5 years with other people about whether we needed it, so we named this in her honor. The committee that selects it is Craig, the editor, and two other, Rita Kirk-Willick and Marilyn Young, served this year. The committee has selected an article entitled The Influence of Individual Communication Media on Public Confidence in Democratic Institutions by Michael Fowl, Patricia Moy, Bradley Radler, Michael Bridgman for the 1999 Rose B. Johnson Award. Is Michael here to accept? Let's applaud. The next award is named the T. Earl Johnson Edward Paget Distinguished Service Award. T. Earl Johnson and Edward Paget were the founders of Southern States Communication Association. They met with a small group in Birmingham and convinced them that we needed to get together. So yearly we recognize someone who has provided distinguished service to us. Let me read from the letter of nomination. I first encountered Dr. Burt Bradley when I entered the University of Richmond as a freshman in 1965. From his tenure at Richmond and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then on to Auburn, Burt has been a leader in the field of speech communication. He coached excellent debate teams at Richmond and went on to develop strong programs at UNC and Auburn. Professor Bradley was also a scholar. The Index to Journals and Communication Studies from 1990 to 17 articles authored or co-authored by him. Burt was most active member of Southern States Communication Association, serving in many offices, including president of our association. The standards he instilled in the organization he developed contributed to the development of many of our leaders today in the field of speech communication. We are pleased to present the T. Earl Johnson Edwin Paget Award to Dr. Burt Bradley. Many of you may know or you may not know that Burt has Alzheimer's disease and is suffering. I spoke with his wife and she wanted to come accept the award on his behalf, but she could not. So we're very fortunate that one of his former students, Lisa Moore, who along with her husband Timothy, established 2 endowed scholarships at Auburn University in honor of Burt. Lisa, would you please accept the award? The next award has just been named the John I. Cisco Excellence in Teaching Award. Let me read some comments about this recipient. The professor is consistently our department's finest instructor. Each term he routinely receives the highest evaluations from undergraduate and graduate students on teaching skills. The professor is competent, consistent, fair, rigorous, and demanding. This individual has a command of materials and is able to bring to life in a manner that is unparalleled. Although classes were some of the most challenging that I ever encountered, they were also certainly the most beneficial. As a newer teacher, I always struggled with the line between theory and application, yet this professor has provided me an example that will influence me for the rest of my career. I credit his teaching and personal attention that brought my own research interests into focus. This professor has been my teacher, supervisor, my director. Now I'm proud to have him as a friend. This makes him a very well-balanced individual who not only possesses much knowledge and much wisdom. In short, teaching is a means of preparing students to be independent thinkers. I feel most successful, says the recipient, when students are able to take what they have learned and improve their lives and the lives of others. It gives me great honor and personal pleasure to present the SSC John I. Cisco Teaching Award to Lawrence A. Hosson. In case you don't know, Larry is my husband. And I try to keep that a secret all the way. If there was a bit of emotion. The last award that we're proud to present is called the Michael M. Osborne Teacher Scholar Award. We've called for balance, we've called for integration between the two commitments of our teaching and research responsibilities. And this award is designed to recognize someone who has achieved the balance between teaching, scholarship, and service. I would like to read about this year's recipient. He has won the American Scholar Teaching Award twice at the University of Florida. But more than that, he became a mentor as well as a teacher. Listen to what some former students have said. Dr. Carpenter would convey his infectious enthusiasm and knowledge of rhetoric with each meeting. My passion grew for rhetoric. Ron, she was encouraged by Ron to go to graduate school. When she found, she says, I came into a program with understanding that far exceeded what many of my colleagues learned in their undergraduate studies. Now in a PhD program, she says, he is truly a mentor, teacher, and friend. It was through his guidance that I am here today. As only a great teacher can, he recognized desire, kindled it, and provided me with the opportunity to pursue my dreams. As for being a scholar, we can ask, what does he publish? If being listed in the top 3% of active prolific scholars in communication studies in 1992 will qualify, that's for starters. Indeed, his 5 books, only 1 co-authored, and over 4 dozen published articles verify his fertile mind. Art researcher and constant inquirer finds his way to print. His specialty? It is rumored that students will approach him at conventions. Are you really Frederick Jackson Turner? An associate professor from another school wrote, Ron Carpenter's published scholarship has been a model for its attention to its historical context and its impeccable archival research and the care he always takes with his writing. It is my pleasure to present the Michael Osborne Teacher Scholar Award for Ronald H. Carpenter of the University of Florida. Let me invite you to join our award winners at the Osborne reception, where you will get a chance to congratulate them also.
I'd like to call Ronnie Shaw to the podium. She will present the Sam Becker Award for Central States.
Sam will be presenting the Sam Becker Award. I am just here to introduce Sam as the presenter of the Sam Becker Award and talk a little about what the award means. The award was set up in 1989 to recognize the top graduate student paper in the Mass Communication Interest Group at Central States. Sam, as we all call him now, or Professor Becker, he has many accomplishments, and people, in fact, know him, and you will hear more about those from Gary and Arlie in just a few minutes. However, as someone who belongs to the mass communication interest group, I can tell you that Sam serves as a mentor to us all. He typifies and he epitomizes the scholar, researcher, mentor model. He has been a guiding force in the mass communication interest group. He is probably one of the original founders of the mass communication interest group, but I wouldn't go as far as to boldly make that claim. But he certainly has served as the guiding spirit. He is current in his research. He comes to panels. He encourages graduate students and faculty to think and evaluate their work critically. I have never been to a panel where Sam has not offered words of encouragement to the researchers. And in fact, it gives me great pleasure to state today that the recipient of the Sam Becker Award, who wins the top graduate student paper in the mass communication division, is in fact follows along Sam's direction and lines. Our winner is Charles Sukup, and Charles' paper, you should have been there earlier today, examined computer-mediated communication and the future of all of this technology, a field that Sam is much interested in we always end up in discussions about the nature of the field. And let me also just say on the side that Sam is not just a great researcher and a world-renowned, communication scholar. He is also probably one of the most humane persons I have had the pleasure to run into. And on that note, let me introduce Charles. Charles will come up and get the award from Dr. Becker, please.
I get to introduce Sam. Sam's a member of Central States.
Well, I checked into this also, and Professor Becker is also a patron member of Southern States Communications.
Oh, well then Sam Becker doesn't need any introduction to this audience.
Oh, sure, you thought you got lucky, didn't you?
Just in case there are a couple of people in the audience who may not know of Sam Becker's accomplishments, we thought maybe we should tell you about a couple of them. Currently, Sam Becker is University of Iowa Foundation Distinguished Professor Emeritus in Communication Studies in the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Iowa.
He has 3 degrees from the University of Iowa. His PhD is in communication theory and research, and he's done postdoctoral study in sociology at Columbia University.
I found out that he has taught at the University of Wyoming, University of Wisconsin, University of Iowa, and Nottingham University in England, and at over 50 other universities he has lectured in over 25 states.
14 years as the chair of the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Iowa. And you know, you can't stop this guy, because even when he goes into retirement, they call him back. He became the interim director for the School of Art and Art History at the University of Iowa, and also became the interim provost, all while he was retired.
He has a number of honors, and we're not going to read all of them. But I want you to know that he is University of Iowa Foundation Distinguished Professor of Communication Studies for 1982, Distinguished Communicator Award from Central States Speech Association, 1984, Elizabeth G. Anders Award for Distinguished Service in the Field of Communication Studies, Ohio University, 1984, Speech Communications Association's Distinguished Service Award, 1989, University of Iowa Faculty Service Award, 1989, Speech Communication Association's Distinguished Scholar Award, 1992, B. Aubrey Fisher Distinguished Mentor Award from International Communication Association, 1993, University of Iowa Distinguished Alumni Award, 1994, First Speech Communication Association Gerald M. Phillips Award for Distinguished Applied Communication Scholarships, 1994, Best Article published in 1994 from the Southern States Communication Association, Speech Communication Association Distinguished Service Award, renamed the Samuel L. Becker Distinguished Service Award in 1995. Fellow of the International Communication Association. University of Iowa's Communication Studies Building has been named the Samuel L. Becker Communication Studies Building in 1993.
He was the president of the Speech Communication Association. He was the interim executive director of the Iowa State Humanities Council. He has been the editor of speech monographs, and he has been editor of several other special issues. And he serves on the editorial board of over 7 journals.
He's also been the chair of evaluation teams evaluating or examining PhD programs and departments on campuses in 36 different universities. Also on the advisory screening committee of educational radio television for U.S. Committee on International Exchange of Persons, senior Fulbright Hayes program, 1968 to 1970. There are only 20 pages here. We're trying to condense this. And I think we scheduled something like 57 different kinds of publications.
Oh, no, there's 100, well, there's 110 chapters and articles.
6 books.
6 books.
And this is more than some graduate students have read.
Not those that are here, of course. He's advised over 57 PhD dissertations, and he's touched a lot of lives. And what I would like to do here for our little audience participation part is that if Professor Becker has served on one of your committees or you've taken a class with Dr. Becker, would you stand, please?
Without further ado, Sam Becker.
I can't help but mention one thing that Dwight freshly missed when he was talking about all of the things that he's gotten from the Central States Communication Association. He forgot to mention how nice we were to him on the tennis court yesterday. British novelist and playwright George Bernard Shaw, as you well know, made many interesting suggestions and observations about British and American life. And one that he made in a radio broadcast in 1931 I find especially intriguing. Shaw argued that every person who owes his life to civilized society, who has enjoyed its very costly protections and advantages, as all of us here have, should appear at reasonable intervals before a properly qualified jury to justify his existence, which should be summarily terminated painlessly if he fails to justify it. Well, although Shaw's price of failures, it may be a bit high, the basic idea seems to me to have some merit. So what I would like to do today is suggest some of the work we who profess communication studies discipline might do to justify our existence. To do this, to look forward and project the future in this way, I think it's useful first to look back and see some of the ways we successfully, I believe, justified our existence. As I do this, I want to stress that this is a highly personal perspective. I'm not reconstructing the past. I am reconstructing the past that is my perspective and constructing a future that is my dream. I hope, of course, that some, if not all of you, will share that dream. But more important, I believe each of you, each of us in our field must construct his or her own dream about how they are going to justify their existence, how each of us will justify our existence,
how we plan to make a difference in this world, and how our field can make a difference in this world. I would suggest that each of us and each of our generations needs to rethink history for itself and make its own plans for the future. Although the histories and plans of others are useful, the paths back and forward are very different as we view them from different times and different places. There is no single valid history. Each generation's history must fit its needs, must be built out of and around those needs. If we do not define ourselves through our histories in this way, others are going to do it, and with their goals, not ours in mind. So I think this is absolutely critical. So I want to talk a bit about my construction of the history of our field of communication studies. You know, when I entered this field almost 60 years ago now, the bulk of the scholarly work that I saw being done had a very clear purpose: to improve the quality of people's discourse. To a considerable degree, our field came into being, both in ancient times and in its 19th and 20th century reincarnation, for that very purpose. Studies were being done of major speakers, their education, their philosophy, their modes of speech preparation and delivery. The goal, tacit or overt, was to develop models that others could follow, and thus improve their communication skills. And by improving their skills, I think we need to add improving our society, because through communication, we can improve this society. Other researchers were working to achieve that goal of improved communication more directly. From the time of the classical rhetoricians to the present day, scholars and teachers in our field have sought ways to motivate and improve students' communicative skills and to understand the effect of those skills on individuals. And included in this line of research, as most of you I'm sure are well aware, were even studies to help children and adults with severe communication handicaps, from stage fright, faulty articulation, projection, breath control, to stuttering. There were many studies on the influence of speaking skills on personality and, more generally, on mental hygiene. There were also some studies of the way people in groups could communicate more effectively to achieve their communal ends. Now, among the most interesting developments in our field that I saw over the years was the way we viewed the media of communication, first seeing them as simply extensions of our voices, our appearance, our words, and only much later, and much more slowly, recognizing that these technological developments changed communication in kind as well as degree. And very interestingly, our award winner today talked precisely about this kind of problem. One of the ways we in our field ought to justify our existence, it seems to me, is to seek understanding of how each new medium that comes along changes communication and thus changes our society, and how we can ensure, at least to some degree, that the changes are positive. We've tried to attempt that to some degree in the past, but we've not always done this very well. For example, when radio first came into being, the leaders in our field saw it simply as a means of projecting our speech to widely dispersed audiences, and they initiated courses in our departments in speech and radio, or radio drama. When computers became a practical reality, we saw them simply as a faster way to do factor analyses and analyses of variance, and as facilitators of writing. They made editing and correcting our papers easier. They facilitated and speeded our correspondence. They certainly made writing a dissertation easier. But they also changed the way we communicate. And to some extent, they changed our social relations. As just one very minor example, I recall the great relief of my family when I went from writing our weekly family letters on a manual typewriter with 8 carbon copies, the last 2 or 3 of which were illegible, when I went to using a computer and simply printing 9 individual copies on my computer's printer, to finally bypassing the printer and emailing the letter to all of the relatives on my family list, each of them now getting a legible copy, which sometimes is good, not always necessary. At first glance, nothing fundamental appears to have changed. I'm still writing letters, sending them to family members. But more careful observation show that a great deal has changed. I've expanded the number of relatives to whom I write weekly because there's no cost once I add them to my family list. I hear from relatives today that I've never heard from before because they find it easier to drop me a line via email than through a traditional letter. Because all of us now get the same letters each one sends, we've developed a stronger sense of family. And the concept of family itself has enlarged. Because my letter goes to my wife's relatives as well as my own, these 2 groups are beginning to feel a kinship, which I certainly would never have predicted. In short, family correspondence has ceased to be bi-directional and become multi-directional. There have even been instances I learned about after the fact that some of my relatives forwarded my letter to other friends and relatives of theirs, people I don't know. Conversely, they also sent me an occasional bit that they received from one of these friends or relatives. Too frequently, I'm afraid, just groups of bad jokes, but still, information very often. We even get some family photos sometime through email now of their children, their grandchildren. All of this has had a circular effect on my letter writing. I now think about writing in a different kind of way. I'm now hesitant to simply report on what my wife and I have done over the preceding week. I'm afraid it would bore them. At least it would bore those more distant relations. So I feel an obligation to make my letters more thoughtful and interesting. I can no longer simply sit down with a week's calendar and rattle off what we did. I find myself making notes of unusual bits that I've come across in the newspaper, interesting thoughts that I've had or that I've heard. In short, my weekly family letter has become quite a different object, just as family has become something quite different than it was before. Now, I recognize that computers have not been used in the same way or had the same effect on all individuals and all families. In fact, my informal observations suggest that there is great heterogeneity in their use and the influence they've had. And that heterogeneity seems to me a major characteristic of communication here on the cusp of the 21st century. I believe we need to try to understand that heterogeneity, its virtues and its faults, its potential and its limit. This means that as scholars, we need to learn how to deal with heterogeneity, which we've never been very good at doing, and stop focusing largely on norms, because it seems to me what characterizes this age and the coming age is heterogeneity. And if we're going to understand communication, we need to find some ways to get a handle on that. We need to figure out what an optimum balance in our mediated society might be between commonality and difference, and then find a way to approximate that ideal, the balance that will optimize communicating and working together. Now, you might well say now with considerable validity that this is not a new problem that I'm articulating. Communication in this country, like people, has always been heterogeneous, even though we've not recognized it as often as we might in our scholarship. But I would suggest that the kind or the locus of this heterogeneity has changed, and this change has the important social consequences. The locus or source of heterogeneity traditionally was the family or the social group. Education and the media were homogenizing forces. There was a fairly narrow range of knowledge, beliefs, and values espoused within each family and within each social group. On the other hand, there were great differences among families and social groups in the knowledge that they held, in their beliefs, in the values that they espoused. The schools and the media, on the other hand, offered a great range of knowledge, beliefs, and values, and especially important, all families, all groups were exposed to that entire range. From the days of the penny press and even more from the pre-television days of radio, whatever medium of communication we used gave all of us, almost forced on all of us, substantial variety of content. Each daily newspaper and each radio station, striving to maximize the size of its audience, attempted to satisfy as great a variety of interests as possible. And for radio stations, that variety was also mandated to a very considerable extent by the rules of the Federal Communications Commission. Thus, you could stay all day with one radio station and get comedies and dramas, soap operas and children's programs, news, sports, religious programs, and more. Since the early days of television, as you well know, radio has changed. It has moved from being a source of great variety on every station to each station being a source of a very narrow range of material, a particular kind of rock music, or all talk, or all news, or all country and western, or whatever. The only way to get some variety is to get up and change the frequency, an action most listeners seem loath to take. The move towards specialized content that is affecting all of the media today has been spurred by an increasingly sophisticated marketing industry. That industry no longer seeks the largest audience possible for its advertisements because it doesn't want to pay for audience members it can't use, audience members who are unlikely to be potential customers. Instead, it wants to know that most of the people it is paying for and asking the media to deliver might be persuaded to buy the products it is selling. This demand for specific kinds of audiences has led to the development of more and more specialized magazines, to a somewhat lesser extent, more specialized newspapers. In addition, broadcast television, although on the surface seeming to retain the heterogeneity of pre-World War II radio, is also slowly narrowing its range of programming to target an audience that is more saleable to advertisers, that is, youngish adults with good incomes. There's little interest in programming anything that would just appeal to children, or to older Americans, or to the poor. Although slower to pick up the trend, newspapers also are now beginning to respond to the pressures of the marketplace. That is, the pressures of the marketing and advertising industry, not the readers. The result of these trends is that most individuals have far less serendipitous encounters with different kinds of entertainment or different kinds of information than they once had, because their favored radio or television stations, magazines, newspapers, other press media make it easier for them to avoid the unfamiliar, the material they do not already know and like. And in schools and in colleges, too, we have a far greater variety of courses than we once had on a much greater variety of subjects, but fewer courses or subjects that all students have in common, that everyone must take. Now, further exacerbating this situation is the development of cable and the internet, where one, as you know, can keep one's input even more highly specialized. One can watch and read about nothing but sports all day long, or nothing but music videos. And one could read news stories about nothing but tenets of the Soviet Union. Thus, we have in the media and in the schools what seems at first glance an anomalous situation. There is greater variety out there in the media than we have ever had before, and there's greater variety in the schools than we have ever had before. But at the same time, it has never been easier to avoid that variety, at least not since the dawn of radio. In fact, one must now make a special effort to encounter the variety. It rarely comes about serendipitously. As a result of this situation, we're developing a tendency to live within our own restricted cocoon of information and our same set of familiar experiences with insufficient knowledge of the experience of others. Now, I see these trends as posing dangers for our society. We have fewer common experiences, less of a common base that can help us understand each other and work together on societal problems. The situation is made even worse by the erosion of a relatively common curriculum in the schools and colleges. There are no books, for example, that educators generally agree all children or all colleges should read. Now, I understand and even sympathize to a very great extent with the argument that the so-called canon was biased toward works written by old, white Christian men. But when the bulk of educated men and women read those books, they had some common ground that aided communication. Now, I'm not concerned about any of the particular books in the traditional canon. I am concerned that educated men and women in our society need to share a base of experience that provides a common set of references to which they can refer. That is, in effect, they need a common language. And without that, it is difficult for us to communicate with each other or to work together. Another diminution of common experiences is due to the loss of statewide newspapers, such as the Minneapolis Star and Tribune once was, or the Des Moines Register, the Atlanta Constitution. These papers that at one time virtually all of the business leaders, the educational leaders, professional, political, and labor elite in each state once read. In Iowa, all of the leaders in the state once read the Des Moines Register, and it gave those leaders in the state a common base of information every day. That base has been eroded because, again, advertisers did not want to buy a statewide audience. As a result, these papers cut back their circulation, largely to their metro areas. Without that base of common information, today's leaders in the various states are living in worlds that are further and further removed from each other than they ever were before. Now again, I'm not arguing that these developments or others like that are moving groups further apart from each other, that these are necessarily all bad. For example, the great stress in the past few decades on avoiding the melting pot, identifying more with our ethnic, racial, religious, and sexual groups have enriched our individual cultures and our society in a great many ways. On the other hand, it has moved us further away from Marshall McLuhan's global village, from some modicum of shared values and a shared tongue, shared goals. That is, from the requisites for working together, communicating together for our common good. Well, it seems to me that as we look to the future at where our field could move productively, I would suggest that one of many great possibilities is to work on the problem of how to break down those walls between the restrictive, communicative worlds in which most of us now live. Finding ways for us to live happily in our special worlds, whatever they may be, but at the same time, happily and productively in the larger world that all of us share. Most of the major problems of the world are ones in which we all have a stake in increasing understanding and respect for people who are different than us, decreasing unhealthy behaviors such as alcohol and tobacco use, increasing our skills at working together for the solution of problems. That last may be the most important of all. We live in a social world. In every aspect of the world, we must collaborate with others to get our society's work done, whether in offices, in factories, on farms, and in laboratories, in video studios, and legislatures. And much of that work of that society is accomplished, as you very well know, through communication. So both the teaching and the scholarly work of communication scholars is very critical here. One of the most important skills we can give youngsters in our schools and colleges is the knowledge and the skills to work with others in the solution of problems, especially others in very different fields. Most of the major scholarly developments, important developments today, are made by people from different fields coming together and looking at problems in their different ways and working on solutions. Our people need to know how to do that. Wherever these youngsters wind up, they are going to need those skills at working with a variety of people in the solution of problems. And some of our scholars need to continue studying what those requisite skills are and how they might be taught and how they might be learned. And to augment those skills, we must first find practical means to use the media and the schools to give citizens a reasonably common base of knowledge and understanding to facilitate their communication and their working together. Now, it probably seems to some of you that I'm placing too great stress here on applied research and practical communication and practical education. I'm clearly stressing it, but I don't think that stress is too great. I don't think it can be too great. One of the reasons that we in the humanities and social sciences in colleges and universities are not held in higher regard by our society is that people do not see what it is that we're contributing to the society. They don't see what difference our scholarly work makes. Americans have a very large investment in all of us in the academy, the cost of our education, and now supporting us as we do our teaching and our research. They're not sure they're getting the money's worth. And I suspect that even some of us wonder about that some days. In light of this situation, we must strengthen our determination and our efforts to ensure that our teaching and our scholarship contribute substantially to the lives of people, including our students, and to the lives of our society. In this way, I believe we can justify our existence, even to Shaw's satisfaction, and more importantly, to our own satisfaction and the satisfaction of our society, so that neither we nor our field need to be terminated. Thank you.
It's always inspiring to hear you speak, Sam, and we do appreciate it. Well, very, very much. Thank you. Well, we have accomplished something that Sandra and Gary and Harley and I were really concerned about. If we could keep this thing rolling, if we could recognize all of you wonderful people who need to be recognized with the spirit and respect and joy that we hope, we're really proud that we have done that. Sandra, come up here. We now, I guess this is the S squared. This is the Susan and Sandra act. We are symbolically, now I don't know what the difference is.
Hers is
You
bigger
better
than
know.
hers is bigger than mine.
Anyway, yesterday at our appropriate breakfasts, we did pass these gavels to Gary and to Harley, even though that was symbolically. We would like to thank Gary and Harley again for their good work. We would like to invite you to the
Dance tonight. Dance tonight at 9 o'clock.
I I think so.
I think it's at 9 o'clock. A lot of rock and roll. We have a great disc jockey. I think he'll enjoy tremendously. Come let your hair down, do a little twist and shout, a little electric slide. You gotta be there. It'll be great.
Okay. So in our last act, we will turn our respective presidencies to Gary.
And Arlene.
Gavel envy is a terrible thing to have. As my first, or almost first official act, I would like to present this plaque on behalf of the association to Susan for outstanding service as president of Southern States Communication Association, for being a wonderful leader, being a person who's been easy for me to work with, for all the great things she's done for all of us.
We did this yesterday, but we're going to do it again. Because Sandra is such a wonderful person. And she's really inspired us in the last 3 years, being on our board, planning our program last year, her leadership this year. And yes, her gavel is smaller, but that has nothing to do with her stature mentally. Sandra, we appreciate all you've done for us. I do want to tell you the DJ tonight has won the DJ of the Month award in the DJ Times. Seriously, he's very proud of this. It's something from across the nation, including Europe, some parts of Europe at least. And he is the current DJ of the Month. He's going to be great. So don't miss their dance. And with that,
And one announcement, undergraduate honors people, you will receive your certificates at the Osborne reception, and everyone is invited to the Osborne. I hope now.
okay,
Okay, ready?
there we
Go.
adjourn.